Hello there, I am Zilfin, and this is the Joy of Computer Gaming, where we investigate good, intriguing, and is that what's supposed to be a slime? And not so good games. Today's highlighted game is Mystic Well, the whack-a-worm off a ways wondering why you didn't witness your weapon whisk away whatsoever game. It's a real-time dungeon crawler role-playing game created by Jim Todd, released for the Atari ST in 1990. So far as I can tell, this game is known for being very hard, quite strange, and unfortunately it looks just awful. The look of the game is, well, it's memorably bad. Everything has a very minimalistic feel to it. There's icons for your items that are minimal effort versions of icons. My wife is playing an idle game on Congregate right now called NGU Idle, which looks intentionally bad, and it uses the same sort of minimalistic icons. Jim Todd, if Mystic Well was also meant to look intentionally bad, good job there. There's a never-changing character image at the upper right, except when you die it turns into a skull. And the view that largely consists of solid gray walls, though there are some places with other colors for the walls, and occasionally walls with a plant on them, or whatever the heck these are supposed to be. The floor and ceiling come in a couple different colors, but with the same pattern, or they vaguely look like grass and a sky in a couple areas. There are wells, some types of doors, and horrible-looking chunky stairs. You'll occasionally also see these skulls in some walls, and wait a minute, are these supposed to be like the demon faces in Dungeon Master? And good lord, those enemies. Just about every enemy is drawn with an ellipse and line tool and vaguely convey what they are. Seriously, this is a dragon, this is a worm, and a spider, I think? This is a cougar, maybe? But the enemies that are more complex, in air quotes, look laughably bad, like the fighters, the rogues, or the ghost things. Some of them have 5 images each, with a frame for each direction and another for attacking. Others only have 2 frames, one for standing there and one for attacking. Dungeon Master was the same way, but they would often flip the images and have the characters shift a tiny bit to give the illusion that there's more frames and liveliness and it didn't look so static. These days, people call Mystic Well style the MS Paint style, except that's more similar to what was used in Moraf's world, and, well, those bad doodle images are at least unique looking. Here it looks like somebody couldn't even be bothered to spend more than a minute drawing each creature. And these are the original sad fat dragons with no friends. This can't be blamed on the Atari ST, as it had some rather impressive imagery before this game came along. In fact, this game is copying so much from both Blood Witch and Dungeon Master, let's see how the monsters compare. They didn't want to bother showing projectiles fly through the air, so when you throw something, it instantly arrives at its destination. Except for a couple spells, like Fireball, because they actually made graphics for them. So they fly through each tile until they reach their target, just like the Fireballs in Blood Witch. They already had the code for this, so why didn't they just set this up for all projectiles? I get that only a single person made this game, but without artistic talent, they could have gone for some sort of consistent feel, like make everything outlines or a matching color, or anything but what they did. This looks worse to me than Moraf's World or even Dare to Dream. Actually, I think the original Rogue looks better than Mystic Well. If the look doesn't put you off, the controls will. Absolutely everything is done with the mouse, which is normally fine with the right UI. There are 10 icons at the bottom for eat, save or load, attack, use an item, and 6 for movement. You can click on the main screen to pick items up, drop them, or use them on the tile ahead of you. In the main screen, you can also click to open or close a door, or use one of the whopping 4 buttons in the entire game, 2 of which are right next to each other and do the same thing. You can see your class, level, health, stats, and armor levels. Rather forward-thinking, the game does show icons for all the buffs you have on, though they don't tell you anything about them. The compass is nice, if nothing else. Your inventory and equipment is always visible, like you could have in Blood Witch, though it's optional there. But later single-player games like Dungeon Hack and Ultima Underworld have your inventory visible at least most of the time. So far, okay. except the moment you actually start using the controls. The game is constantly laggy, though at least the mouse is controlled by the OS and moves smoothly. The game itself seems to be running at about 2 frames a second by counting 30 frames between every redraw, which is just horrible feeling because the game doesn't properly queue up clicks, often doing so quite randomly. I think it queues any mouse events each frame update but doesn't act on them until the next one at the earliest, forever forcing a half-second delay on everything at best. You can see this really badly when I'm moving the mouse quickly. I've changed the emulator to run at the ST's default 8 MHz all the way up to very high speeds, and it makes no difference at all. This means the programmer hard-coded this delay into the game. There are so many times that clicks are just ignored, causing the controls to feel very unresponsive, and since the UI is not responsive and doesn't even show a highlight or click action of any sort when you click a button, you often cannot tell the game's registered it at all. Other times, you rapidly click frustrated, but you can move your mouse away and have multiple clicks happen over and over again. When attacking, you just keep clicking the attack button. But since the game is unresponsive and queues up clicks until you can actually make another attack, which may be a couple seconds later if you run out of energy, you almost always swing 2, 3, even 5 extra times after your current enemy blinks out of existence, wasting your precious energy and making the next fight much harder. And of course, making it impossible to do anything until the queue runs out. If you're in a false wall, the view is completely solid like this. There is a section of the game where you have to pass through many of them in a row, and I cannot begin to explain how horrible mapping this area was when I had no easy way of knowing whether I've moved or not, whether there was a tile in front of me that I could walk into or not. I had to resort to trying to place an item in the space ahead of me. If it failed to place there after multiple clicks, of course, it had to be a wall. That was my best guess. Ugh. By contrast, in Dungeon Master, clicking a movement arrow shows a highlight on the arrow, so you know it registered before the view screen catches up. With Blood Witch's tiny screen, well, that game's just incredibly fast to render and respawn. You can also use key presses in both Dungeon Master and Blood Witch, which feel great to use there for moving. I could not figure out how to do anything with keyboard controls in Mystic Well. They all just made the default ST click sound and did nothing. The game did come with a tiny file for documentation and a plot, so there's technically a story for the game. A wizard put his life force into a golden skull, took over a citadel known as the Mystic Mirror, and declared he was a god. You play the single person sent out to whack the Gilded Deadhead to stop his evil plans, which you can only infer will lead to the end of the world. Yep, again with sending a level 1 nobody with absolutely no gear off to save the world. Nothing could go wrong with that. The game world is only what you can see in the game. There are 10 levels in the game, which are an odd 80 by 20 configuration, making them all feel both cramped and sprawling at the same time. Assuming the level you start on is level 1, there are 3 sub-levels and 6 levels above you. So when I say sub-level 3, I mean the bottom floor 3 down from where you start. You don't do the levels in any sort of meaningful order, roughly level 1, sub-level 1, any one of 2 through 5, or all if you really want to, sub-levels 2 and 3, then up to level 6, and finally level 7. Levels 2 through 5 are for each of the 4 classes, level 2 for fighters, 3 for priests, 4 for rogues, and 5 for wizards. You only need to go to one of these for the ruby key to unlock sub-levels 2 and 3. These are mimicking the 4 paths of Chaos Strikes Back, which had a fighter, ninja, wizard, and priest path. I think I'm the only person who's ever made complete maps of every level of this game. I didn't realize that you start facing west, nor the size of the dungeons, so my first level map is split up oddly and oriented the wrong way. I can't be bothered to fix it. The level design is abysmal, largely just long hallways with repetitious rooms off either side. The 3 levels that aren't are a giant open area, and 2 levels that have about a quarter decent level design with 3/4 just random meaningless filler with no real point. There are loads of false walls, pits, twisters that always make you face north, teleporters, triplates, and later walls that shoot damage spells constantly, though they don't look different at all from other walls. There are wells you can toss coins and gems into for experience or get water from, and there are a couple wall decorations that don't mean much. There are various signs on walls that don't tell you much of anything meaningful and can't decide whether to use you and your or thou and thy. The stairs make you go directly up or directly down a level, instead of moving a space like all other games do, or real stairs actually would. They could have worked around this by having spiral stairs like you see in Eye of the Beholder or Stonekeep, but instead you get these chunky stair things. The last level has many, many walls that shoot you constantly with spells. Since there's no animation of this at all, you just seem to constantly get hit by spells by nothing whatsoever. Not that it helps figuring out what's going on when enemies can shoot you with spells when they're behind false walls or too far away to see. The game hardly explains anything at all, so most of this is just guesswork from having played through the game, other than the 4 classes. Some of it comes from the documentation for a beta version of the game, because the released freeware version has significantly less documentation than that for some bizarre reason. Every attack does physical, fire, electric, or poison damage, and you have defenses against these types of attacks. The only positive this has over other games is that it actually shows you what your defenses are, and you could very much feel those defenses helping you survive. When you attack, a chevron appears, colored according to your attack type, such as gray for physical and yellow for magic. But you cannot tell if you hit or how much damage you're doing. When enemies hit you, you see X's in the corners of the view area in the damage type color, but you have no indication where it came from or how much damage it did. It's completely guesswork how well you're doing in a battle. You know when an enemy has been defeated if they blink out of existence. You know you've died when the screen goes black and you turn into a skull. Well, the black part doesn't always work correctly. When you start the game, you have to roll for your character's stats, with values from 3 to 18. I'm so glad that rolling for stats died off later because this is stupid. Not only that, but this is clearly stacked against you, so low rolls happen more often than high rolls. My first game, Maze of Death, had an eerily similar stat roller to this, but I was a teenager and didn't know any better. You can choose to play a rogue, wizard, priest, or the game can't decide if it's a fighter or a warrior. Let's just say fighters. They all play the same, except each has a special ability and they get different health leveling up, with fighters getting the most and wizards getting the least. Fighters get a pointless pummel move that uses up all of their energy, rogues can jump over a tile, priests can heal themselves, get a mini-map and a minor defense buff, and wizards can reuse spellbooks. That last bit is important in explaining how much wizards are royally screwed over because your inventory is tiny. You have 4 bars next to your character to deal with, which are health, energy, food, and water. Energy drops whenever you move, attack, throw an item, or use an item. Food governs how fast you regain health, and water governs how fast you regain energy. Health is the only value of all of these that has a number you can see. There's very little healing in the game, but you can drink water over and over for 1 health at a time, so kinda? You finally get a healing morning star near the end of the game that saps your food away fast, and find a healing spellbook just before the final boss. The amount of energy you have never seems to increase throughout the game, and gets sapped away severely when attacking. You get tired so fast swinging any weapon, and then the battle gets really, really sluggish. You can't generally do the dancing style attacking you can do in other dungeon crawlers because moving also takes energy, so battles just turn into spamming the attack button or use item button over and over until one side is dead. It gets so slow if it drags on for more than a few seconds. Gaining a level only seems to increase your health, though it makes the priest's heal and buff ability stronger as well. You also have 4 stats. Strength, which governs your damage, agility, which according to the beta version of the game governs how much energy you use and how well you dodge, reason probably controls how well spells work, and vigor gives you more health. The game doesn't tell you when you level. You'll just notice it went up on occasion because you seem to take damage from absolutely nothing because you have to heal up to your new health. Your character has equipment slots for a necklace, ring, headgear, shirt, pants, footwear, left and right hand, and a minuscule 7-space inventory. You're a single character. This is really unacceptable. Nothing stacks, and there aren't even containers to help mitigate this tiny inventory. Ignoring throwing weapon slots, Dungeon Master gives you 17 general spaces and 2 small item pouch slots per character for a total of 68 general and 8 small, as well as a ton of chests that can hold 8 items each. Blood Witch gives you 8 spaces per character for a total of 32, and non-archers have a spare hand as well. Older single-player games like Gateway to Apshi, Alternate Reality The City, or even Galdrigan's Domain, some later games such as Stonekeep literally give you infinite carrying capacity. Nope, this game gives you 7 total spaces. It wouldn't be so bad if the game didn't want you to carry so fricking much junk. You'll find coins, gems, and useless jewelry in such abundance in the game, and you'll want to bring it all to a well to toss it in because they all give you experience for doing so. But you can't really due to this inventory restriction. You still need to have multiple weapons, food, water, keys, spellbooks if you're a wizard, throwing weapons if you're crazy. I spent so long juggling my tiny inventory in this game. Why is it so tiny? And the items you find in this game are quite maddening. The manual says many ordinary-looking items actually have special powers. What this translates into is that there are several iron rings that do absolutely nothing, 3 of them that give you 1 poison defense, 2 that give you 1 fire electric defense and 2 poison defense, and the last one, near several of the other kinds, will give you 1 physical defense, 3 fire defense, 3 electric defense, 7 poison defense, and raise your reason by 1. The only way to tell them apart is to equip them and watch your stats change or not. Couldn't they just be called Iron Ring +1, Iron Ring of Defense, or anything helpful? The fact that a generic weapon, an iron sword, looks identical and is named the same as the Iron Sword, the most powerful weapon in the game that also gives you a +1 strength and agility bonus and a mini-map, should be a point of frustration to anybody that's played through the game and never knew. There are some obviously magic items with unique names, like Flame Tongue, the fireball-slinging sword that looks very similar to Fury from Dungeon Master, Blade of Venom that shoots a stream of poison cloud, and the Iron Saint, a morning star which raises your vigor by 2 and lets you heal yourself. How does a morning star heal you? Do you fling the chain over your shoulder, allowing the star to impale itself into your back, shout, and when you extract it, you're suddenly healed? You only know what usable items do by using them. Aside from one-use items like spellbooks for non-wizards, everything has infinite uses. Thank goodness for small favors. As I said earlier, aside from your stats and armor, you have no idea how effective anything is or exactly how they function. You have to fuddle your way through everything. I documented every interesting item I found and still have no clue how useful any of them are in relation to each other. There are 5 keys in the game, but unlike most other RPGs, the keys don't vanish when you open a door. This is technically the more logical way for keys to work, but since you have a pathetically tiny inventory, having to carry several keys around just made it even more burdensome. The last key is a skeleton key that you'd think would open any lock, but it seems to be completely worthless, and it couldn't even unlock the blue lock doors right next to it. There are numerous spellbooks that you'll find throughout the game, but since nothing is explained, I never figured out what a lot of them do. Some of them are obvious, like Fireball, Electrobolt, and Gas Puff, though I have no idea what the difference between Fingerclap and Magic Bolt are. Some create defense buffs like Adaption, Power to Protect, and Globe, or Two-Step, which lets you move forward 2 spaces like a Thieves' Jump. I never figured out what Knock Knock, Mnemonic Warp, Magnetic Eye, Matter Feed, or Condense do. The spells are all on spellbooks. If you're a wizard, using a spellbook doesn't destroy it. But then a wizard will be tempted to hold on to several spellbooks when you already have damn near no space to hold much of anything. And many of the spells are also available on weapons or staffs which have infinite uses that anybody can use, such as the Flame Tongue which casts fireballs, or the Enchantress which lets you cast Two-Step. As the game tells you nothing about this, I'm going to spoil it, because I got completely stuck on the last level of the game and had to watch somebody else do a Let's Play at the end of the game. I couldn't figure out how to proceed. You see, the jump ability the thief gets lets you jump over a tile, but as expected, you can't go through monsters' doors or walls with it. The Two-Step spell, however, does let you jump over anything. To complete the game, you need to know this, because you have to jump over walls to complete the game. The only other game I know that has a spell like this is Might and Magic 3, which has a teleport that lets you, well, teleport 1 to 9 spaces in the direction you're facing. It also has a jump spell much like Two-Step, except it fails if you try to jump through a wall, like you would expect. Bard's Tale also has a teleport that lets you choose anywhere in the dungeon to portal to, but these are teleports, where you would expect to pop into existence at your target without ever moving 2 steps or more in that direction. There are various enemies which go from really weak, like the worms, all the way up to the dreaded blue robots. Yep, blue robots are the toughest thing in this fantasy game. That just makes me think of the endgame enemies from the really early Might and Magic games. The enemies have a melee attack, and they may have a ranged attack as well. Almost all of the endgame enemies have ranged attacks, and just walking around the big, open, second-to-last level, you'll get pummeled almost continuously with spells from every direction. Each enemy type has their own armor levels as well, and some of them seem to be immune to certain attack types, like fire being useless on robots. You just have to experiment to figure out what works on what, since you never know how much damage anything does. A couple enemy types don't move, such as these wonky Morningstar plants. The priests look an awful lot like a white version of Chaos from Dungeon Master. The poison and water elementals just look like moving carpets. The fire explosion and electric crystals are unique at least. Oddly enough, the bats seem to have the best artwork in the game. Combat is very, very random. Sometimes an enemy type may take a single attack, then a long stream of attacks to kill the very next one. This may mean only one fireball to kill one vampire, then 6 or more to kill the next one through the door. It all feels very unfair while playing. Enemies also never group together. They always occupy an entire space no matter how small they are, similar to how enemies work in Anvil of Dawn. All of the earlier dungeon crawlers that I know of, like Dungeon Master, Blood Witch, and Galdragon's Domain, allow multiple smaller enemies in a single space. Aside from moving randomly or not at all, enemies will generally just charge an attack. If they have a ranged attack, they'll use it over and over again without moving, whenever they have a straight line towards you, so long as you're within about 8 spaces of them. They don't care if they're within sight of you, which often leads to you being hit and having no idea what's doing it. The AI also ignores false walls. They move and attack through them like they weren't there at all, leading to really goofy-looking views with enemies hovering in a wall and attacking you. Sound is almost non-existent in this game. You get a different sound for each kind of spell, whether you use them or an enemy hits you with them, swinging your weapon, throwing something, opening a door, pressing a key, or hitting one of the bells, which just seem to be annoying. Using the teleport spell also makes a unique sound. Enemies, however, make no sounds whatsoever. I wish I could say there was no music in this game, but the singing sword provides you with this wonderful rendition of Mary Had a Little Lamb. Growing up, I never played the version of Mystic Well that you see here, and instead I played a beta version of the game that was multiplayer called Mystic Mirror. This came out as shareware not long after Blood Witch, a multiplayer dungeon crawler I played with my brother in 1990 and rather enjoyed. I'll talk about Mystic Mirror more in the version section. I would explain completing the game in more detail, but largely it's uninteresting. The only interesting bit is that you have to go through walls to complete the game. When you get to this bit on the last level, you have to jump through the wall here to get to the button that removes a pit so you can jump through the walls over there, and there's a portal that takes you to the end area, which is just a big giant open area with a bunch of walls that shoot you. You complete the game by killing the Golden Skull. It's not a particularly difficult enemy, though it does hit really hard. You just get a text blurb about defeating it, and then the game goes on, for no reason whatsoever. There's a spell you can only get past the Golden Skull, called Create, which just duplicates the item in your other hand when you use it. What's the point? This isn't remotely a good game. Bad graphics, bad controls, lousy level design, requiring you to know things the game never tells you to complete it, and that horrible tiny inventory space just all add up to a bad experience. If it wasn't for the fact I like exploring, making maps, and figuring out how to do speedruns, I wouldn't have found any enjoyment here at all. The game being incredibly difficult also gave me a modicum of fun getting through it, since I was able to progress, albeit slowly. So here's my glowing endorsement for Mystic Well. It's better than Rings of Zilfin, and it isn't the worst game I've played from 1990. When you start the game, if you hold a key down while rolling stats, the game will crash. If you switch disks from your save disk, then try to save, a meaningless file save error message appears that doesn't even clear the previous message, so it just looks like a mess. The rogues cannot move for some strange reason. I'm pretty sure they were meant to move, since there are areas that open up with a load of them that should have hunted you down, but they just stand around in a big group. There's also a rogue that casts spells at you as if it was a wizard. You can see enemies on stairs you just used because stairs don't work like real stairs, and enemies thankfully can't take stairs. Enemies do fall down pits though, and just willingly fling themselves into them. Enemies are not affected by portals. You and an enemy can kill each other with melee attacks. Maybe this is intentional. If you teleport on top of an enemy, they can shoot off spells, which thankfully seem to miss, but it still looks strange. One enemy type near the end of the game doesn't have an attack image. Sometimes they will appear to jump back a space while attacking you, and sometimes they'll just blink in and out. Enemies are sometimes crammed between a door and a wall or two doors, but you can't see them or attack them. But they can attack you just fine. Just back away to see them. If you die while in a poison field, your vision will blink in and out a bit before the poison field dies off. You can try to hit an enemy with a spell, and the spell will appear to hit nothing right in front of you. This happens if another enemy walked in front of you right as you cast the spell, and since the game only updates the view every half second, you don't even see what you just killed. I've already discussed several problems with this game and could go on and on about several more, but I just want to point out a few more. Just using spellcasting items like the Flame Tongue gives you experience. I gained from level 3 to level 5 just hitting this door with fireballs. This is rather slow though. As I was putting this video together, I found out why spells give you experience. Because killing things with spells doesn't give you experience. It's really obvious with the beholders at the end of the game. I'm level 10 here. If I kill it with a spell, I'm still level 10. If I kill it with melee, I go up 5 whole levels. Do wizards really need to be even more at a disadvantage? There are a couple anti-magic areas, but these work based on the target space, not your space, backwards from anything else I've played. Here you can see me failing to hit a fighter with my fireballs because he's on an anti-magic space. If I instead lead him over to the portal landing space, I can blast him just fine. The fact that so many items are not described means you will never know what a lot of things do. For example, there are red meteors, malagmites, and red meteorites next to each other that all use the same graphic. Red meteors and malagmites seem to be only for throwing, but red meteorites are one-use fireglyphs. A sign says, "The Mythweaver holds a secret." I found the Mythweaver near the end of the game. It shoots a spell on attack, but using it just saps all of my energy and doesn't seem to do anything at all. I have no idea what secret it holds, nor do I really care at this point. Some triplates cause walls to appear, but you could just leave an item where the wall would appear to prevent it from happening. There's a spell called Magic Shielding, which greatly increases your defenses but shows 5 colors. There's only 4 defense types. The manual mentions you can shoot fireballs at the walls on the last level. Yeah, I tried that, and it did nothing to the walls and just wasted my time. There are many misspellings or odd wordings used in the various signs in the game. Since I had detailed maps and knew that you could jump over tiles with the right item or spell, I decided to make a couple segmented speedruns of the game. Nothing official, because I have no desire to rerun this game enough times to do an official run without saving. I really don't recommend anybody try doing this non-segmented. The first run I did was with a wizard, and the final version lasts just over 17 minutes running at 16 MHz. I died something like 100 times making this video, and fighting the Golden Skull involved running around the well while taking occasional pot shots at it for over a minute. The second run I did was at the default 8 MHz for the ST, and I used a fighter. It took just over 14 minutes. This time I blitzed my way to the Flame Strike so I could destroy just about everything, then went to the Wizard way to level up and portal down to sub-level 3, get the Magic Iron Sword, the Iron Sate, the final keys, and then the Enchantress. I got really lucky with the stupid robot blocking level 6 as he moved to space right away so I could jump right over him. The randomness of this game made this run very frustrating, with the first pit not even a minute in involving about half of the 70 or so deaths I had doing this run. Jim Todd's website mentions he ported Mystic Well to DOS and renamed it Daymare, but I can't find anything about this version. It really doesn't help that yet another zombie game is coming out soon called Daymare 1998. The version of this game that I played as a kid was a 2-player version named Mystic Mirror. It took me far too long to find this game, eventually finding a copy from an enormous 130 gigabyte download of ST junk from archive.org. It only had the shareware version, which doesn't let you save or progress beyond level 5, but it's enough to play it again. I forced my wife to suffer with me, as usual. This version is played with 2 joysticks, with extended controls being done with the keyboard. In the beginning, you press the button to re-roll and press a direction to choose a class. However, the joysticks only seem to be registered when the screen updates and have a delay before reacting. This makes rolling your characters feel bad. Not a great start. It wasn't any better in the game either. At least an arrow appears when it does respawn and you move, so you know it got the input. Left and right on the joystick strafe, and you have to hold the button down to turn. Pressing up goes forward or attacks an enemy if they're right in front of you, but holding the button down and pressing forward uses the weapon's alternate ability. And the early weapons, like the club, are throwable, so my wife kept tossing her club. Pressing the button and down is how you interact with the main view, such as opening a door. There are key presses to pick up items, switch inventory slots, move items between inventory in your hand, and equip things. If you play a wizard, the number keys can be used to cast spells as well, which sucks the water out of you or even hurts you if you're low on water. Spell books don't suck water out of you, but can only be used once, even on wizards. In fact, a lot was removed in the final game. Mystic Mirror feels like a later, more advanced version of the game, except the even less responsive joystick controls. Oh yes, there's a sequel. Jim Todd created a Daymare 2 for MS-DOS in 1993. His same style of simplistic graphics are used, even though he's using 256 color VGA mode here. By comparison, other similar games in this same graphics mode on the same system include Eye of the Beholder, Lands of Lore, Dungeon Hack, Dungeon Master 2, Anvil of Dawn, and Stone Key. So any perceived restrictions on the look of the game are purely on Mr. Todd at this point. And he mentions that the game was dated with obsolete graphics after Windows XP came out. Sorry, Jim. The graphics were already dead. Many of the same old enemies are here, like the cat things, bats, morningstar plants, and even the spiders. New enemies include giant rats, I think, tiny worms that deal tons of poison damage, and turtles. That volcano in the background is something special, though. Wait a minute, is that supposed to resemble the volcano from Alternate Reality to the City? There's also no sound whatsoever in Daymare 2, which is probably a blessing. You start the game rolling stats, though I saw a few 20s in there, so it's not the same. I just chose a random set that wasn't terrible to get started. You don't pick a class anymore, so I guess you're a jack of all trades. Thankfully, just about everything else has been improved, though the gameplay's largely the same. You can move with the arrow keys with left and right for strafe or the number pad. This does have a little lag in it, like the first game, but largely feels fine to use. You can see how much damage you do with the number next to this tiny sword on the right, you can see what your stamina is numerically, and there's an auto map at the bottom left. You have a backpack with a whopping 16 spaces available now, and you can just drop items onto the pack icon to stuff it into your bag, as well as 2 pouches for readily available items. For some odd reason, when you have an item readied, it shows a blow above it at the bottom right, but not the name, which would have been useful for scrolls to know which it was. Back from Mystic Mirror is the ability to cast spells with symbols. They're done oddly here, in a ring around the Use Item button, and the symbols appear at the upper left under your character. If the spell doesn't exist, no stamina is used, but no message appears either. If the spell does exist, you have to notice something happened to see the result. There are no longer buff icons to show you that you have a shield spell up. However, like Dungeon Master with its scrolls in the game world, this has scrolls and spellbooks that'll tell you how to cast spells. Your stamina drops far more slowly, but it also increases back really slowly. Thankfully, moving doesn't seem to affect it, at least not much. The game world is much smaller. The docs say there are 8 levels, and the minimap only shows a 32 by 32 map, so this game is only about 51% of the size of the first game. The end goal is the same, however: kill the Golden Skull. The docs promise a better story in Daymare 3, which never came to fruition. In any case, this is a better feeling game which plays fine in DOSBox if anybody really is out of dungeon crawlers to play and wants to play a strange one. It's available on Jim Todd's website, which is linked to in the description. Jim Todd made a website called MiltelMaya.com, which seems to be unchanged since 2003. He does mention that he made a couple of games for Compute, and also that Mystic Mirror and Mystic Well, while shareware with a registration fee of $20 at first and later only $10, combined didn't earn him more than $100. His website offers Daymare 2 for download, as well as a 5-in-a-row game for Windows called TAC 5 that reminds me of Cheese and Crackers from Pajama Sam.
Turn you one. I'll be